Your host, Roy. Of course, this is the podcast that brings you a wide variety of guests that can talk about a lot of diverse topics, and today is no different. We have some awesome guests available. Lou Everett and Sherri McManus have taken time out of their day. They are with the Lou Everett Group and are known for their highly effective coaching, teaching, and speaking on the importance of personal growth and how it impacts, influences our leaders. With more than 4 decades of combined experience in training, coaching, and leadership, they have also received training and mentoring from well-known successful coaches and teachers from the likes of Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Tracy, John Maxwell, Jack Canfield, and Paul Martinelli, and are certified leadership coaches and corporate trainers. Their mission is to transform today's leaders by serving people and businesses through leadership coaching, corporate training, empowerment speaking, and personal development. Lou and Sherri, thanks for taking time out of your day to be with us. Certainly appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you for having us.
You bet. You bet. Yeah, this is such an important topic to talk about. And, we had a little pre-show and we've talked in the past about this, is that, leadership is so important. And there are people who are born leaders, I think, but for most of us, it takes work. And hopefully even if you're good, you always want to be growing and learning as you go. So before we get too deep, though, I want y'all to tell us kind of how you ended up in this space and where you came, your background.
Sure.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah. It's a lot there.
Yeah.
We'll make it concise.
Okay. Okay.
I'll start with me, with my background a little bit.
Okay.
So we both come from varying backgrounds, but always tended to be in the leadership space in some fashion.
Okay.
My leadership journey started when I was 17 years old, and I had got my first assistant manager role and thought that I was the big shot. And so since then, I've learned a lot, failed a lot, and had to relearn how to be a successful leader. And so over the years, I've had roles as middle management, upper management, executive leadership levels in corporate, and have learned a whole heck of a lot, not just from the experience, but from what I've learned by the mentoring and coaches that I have engaged with over the years to help me mold into who I am today. I will say one thing you mentioned about born leaders, and we're from the thought that there is no such thing. It's a myth. That we have some characteristics of young when you're born or
right.
As you grow that may have successful leadership qualities perhaps, but as you said, leadership is learned.
Yeah.
Right? Successful leadership is learned because it's all about influence. It's not. There's nothing else. It's really all about how we influence one another in order to accomplish a certain mission, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of in a nutshell where my background. It all started with my mother, and I was about 12 years old. We're instead of being let me listen to my own music in the car. Wasn't allowed to listen to my own tunes. My mom had different ideas. Yeah. So as she's dropping me off at school or friends or what have you, instead it would be cassette tapes of Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and those powerful individuals. And so right from a young age, she started to kind of infiltrate my mind on the idea of what real successful, strong leadership and personal growth really is.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I'm very lucky.
Yeah.
Very, very fortunate. So that's a little tidbit of me. And so, of course, that led us up into where we are today together. But that's another side of the story. But that's where I come from. And then I met Sherri in 2005. And 4 months after we met, we started our own business together.
Oh, nice.
And in 2005, our first business. I don't recommend it right after you've been going out for a minute, but it will certainly make or break and determine whether or not it's going to work.
Yeah.
And we realized real quickly that we would actually work very well together in business as well. That's so we've been, because we are a husband and wife duo, and so we realized quickly that we could use each other's strengths to maximize the potential and success of our business.
Right. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And then mine, just in a nutshell, my mom always shares a story when I was little, and we had neighborhood kids growing up, used to play outside, and she would watch outside the picture window, and here I was, the littlest one out of all of them, and telling everyone what to do and what game we're going to play. So I definitely had some characteristics, and then as I got older, I found myself in those type of leadership or influential type of positions, and it just kind of fell into it. People just looked up to me. They gravitated towards me. So as I got older, I definitely leaned into that. Definitely fell into some traps and some myths of what leadership is and positional leadership. Because again, you surround yourself of who you think you should be surrounding yourself with, and you fall into some traps. And then, as you get more aware, then you realize oh, okay, this is actually something better.
Right.
I think as we grow up, we get into certain jobs, and we're quickly to point out of what that we don't want in a leader or a boss, right? And you're just like, this is I'm never gonna do that. This is we're quickly to do that, and then it's far and few between when you could say, wow, I had a great manager, boss, leader, and I really want to emulate some of those characteristics.
Yeah.
So just kind of like led up into that.
Well, a couple things I was going to comment on is, first off, the husband and wife. My Terry, she's my boss, and it's nice when you can find something that you enjoy doing, and your partner does it and likes it. It's just to me, it's great because we're always talking about things, and she understands what's going on. So and it's hard. It can be hard. So I will say, if it works for you, there's really nothing better than in life than having that all wrapped up together. And then I'm going to send my kids an apology letter because instead of listening to Tony Robbins, we were listening to Led Zeppelin and the Who. So maybe maybe I'll tell them I see now. But let's
well, that was my mother. When I was in the car with my dad, it was a different story, and then we started listening to some music.
Right. Well, let's talk about leadership. We talked a little bit about some leadership deficits, and I think this pandemic may have shined the light and brought out the good qualities in some and the bad in other. And one thing I can think about is the control factor with people being at home, and I'm sure that's an issue. But before we even get into that, I think it's talking about being communicative, having good communication, and then also standards, like we talked a little about, making sure that people know what their role and their importance is in the position, so we can set them up for success and not set them up for failure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those expectations, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's important, right? I mean, if you look at it, it's about trust. Yeah. It really boils down to that in leadership, doesn't it? If you're managing and leading people, it comes down to trust and empathy and understanding.
Yeah, the trust is a big one and this gets back to hiring. I do a lot of work with retention, and so we can have all the ping pong tables and Frappuccino machines and all of that, but if we make bad hires, that's not going to cure the bad hire, whether it's attitude, skill, whatever. So, making those good hires, we need to hire people we trust. And if we have an issue with that from the very beginning, and sometimes it's not even about the candidate or the new hire, sometimes it's more about us as the manager. And it's hard, smaller businesses, we're used to doing everything ourselves and touching everything. So sometimes that trust and letting go can be a lot more difficult.
Sure can be.
Yeah.
That sure can be. And see, it's not even we need to trust our employees, but at the same time, it needs to go the other way around.
Yeah.
We need to build a culture where our employees trust us. If employees don't trust the leadership, they're going to see some serious deficit on that side of it too. Yeah. Performance, retention issues, things like that, which then of course affects the bottom line when you're spending all this money on rehire and retraining. And which is another interesting topic we can get into, because a lot of companies tend to ignore the retention issue sometimes until it's on fire. But it's the point where they've lost so much already. And then they want to figure out what it is and why. And most of the time they blame it on the wrong thing. Unfortunately.
Well, and that's the 5 deadliest words in business is we've always done it this way. And because I come out, I've done a lot of work in the senior living industry, and it's typically very high turnover. that's what even got me to even understand, my background is I worked for a huge public utility back in the day. And I was at this company for almost 20 years and went to night school, and it sparked me to, take some other direction. But I was the very first person that I knew at this company of 20 years that ever left, because I didn't even know what turnover was. And as I'm going through some graduate work, I looked through a book, and it was talking about this nursing home had, sometimes that industry has over 300% turnover. And I fell out of my chair. Like, how, if you got an average 100 people working, how do you hire 300 people in a year to, come through this place? It's unbelievable. Yes, yeah. And so I started doing the research and, finding out the cost of it. The cost is astronomical, even for lower wage at the bottom of the scale. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. And so, kind of focused me on that, which really kind of goes into this leadership, the deficits that we have as leaders, because, again, we've talked a little bit that employees typically will leave managers, not companies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They will.
Yeah.
It really boils down to the culture. As leaders, managers, bosses, however you want to put a title on that, which is, we come from mythology that it doesn't matter your title, it's about influence.
Right.
So if you have an influence on your business, big or small, and if you don't have a people-centric culture, that really turns into a very negative situation.
Right.
And, partly with this pandemic, that has come to light is the players and the pretenders. Mm-hmm. And it has really stuck out to what organizations are really taking their people seriously. And I'm not talking about what you just said, ping pong tables and frappuccinos, right. That's always a nice perk, right. But having a safe space for individuals that they can feel that they're heard, that they feel cared for, that their manager has their back. And right. That is so critical. Mm-hmm. People much rather have that. And then in turn, the bottom line, which I know everybody's focused on, which I know everybody has to eat, but will produce more. Mm-hmm. And that's where the attrition can go. You start seeing the attrition to go lower. Yeah. As long as the team feels heard and you actually take them seriously and have that. And just have that people-centric, mm-hmm. and I'm reading a book with the Simon Sinek, the Infinite Game, yeah. And it's phenomenal, mm-hmm. And it really touches in on this and about the finite versus the infinite. Mm-hmm. And most of these companies are as a finite is let's just promote people that have high performance, right. And they create that culture. And I fell into that trap, and so has Lou, too. Mm-hmm. We're like, hey, we're the rock stars. We're good at what we're really doing. Right. And then you get the management role, and you're like, hey, congratulations. And then 6 months later, you get fired because you didn't meet your metrics. Right. I'm like, well, you didn't equip me. Yeah, right. Like, how was I supposed to know? Yeah. And there is that, it's that constant, hamster wheel over and over again. And now it's time that we really got to pay attention to folks that are in this space, such as ourselves, to say, listen, are you in the long game or are you in the short game? Yeah. Yes, you could be $1 billion company, but at what cost to your people?
Right.
So I can't stress that enough. And that, having that mindset, especially, is key. Yeah. Is so key. It's like, what culture are you trying to or want for your people that work with you? So it's so dire.
Yeah, and so many things. I'm taking notes, and I've got like a page full already.
I know.
But the bottom line is important, right? I mean, this is the reality of it. Okay, if you're in a position of a leader, whether it's an executive director or COO, CEO, even the bottom line is important. That's what drives the business, to be able to provide for your employees and your customers. That is truly important to a business. Right. It's important to mine. It's important to yours. However, there's a distinctive difference between how we approach it as leaders, approach the bottom line, and how we get the job done using our people and leading them to do it. There is what we call the trickle-down effect. That culture starts at the top. That is okay. The pressure comes down to the COO or the president or whoever, the director of their teams, and says, "You've got to get this done. This is the goal. We've got to get it done by XYZ date." And then now how does that person present it to their team?
Right.
Now what we see is that presentation is almost mimicked completely. It's literally modeled. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that it's modeled, and then they pull together. Oh, well, you're not performing. You're not doing this. You got to do this. Get it done. Just get it done. Get it done. Get it done. And now you got workhorses instead of teams.
Yeah.
And then I get burnout, right? They get burnout. They get sick. They leave. They like you're saying, to become disengaged. They lose trust. Mm-hmm. All because of the presentation and how those teams are presented with their role and responsibility, and how to get the goals accomplished, and why.
And we're focusing on the wrong metrics. I'll be pretty bold in saying that. We're focusing on performance metrics, which is great to a degree.
It's necessary. To
a point. But we're so obsessed with the metrics that we neglect that they're humans.
Right.
And we do have to engage to some degree and not separate the two. And yes, I was from a old school mentality as well. It's like, well, you take your emotions and leave them at the door. And here we just work, and you work from 9 to 5 and that's it, kind of thing. And it's like, dang, like that I'm sorry, but it's not even generational, but people are not tolerating that anymore. Yeah. They're not. Yeah. They're really, really not.
Yeah. And I think, again, we get back to some things that I know that you've mentioned: communication, empathy, and then the metrics. I love that because at this major utility that I worked at, we had some awesome metrics that, had we applied them to the business and the process, helped tremendously. But what we did is we took them as a stick, and we would beat employees with the metrics to the point of, it's like, well, instead of me showing this, I'm going to show this because it's going to make me look good. And then now, after this happened for about 6 or 8 months, all these data that we gathered that could have been awesome was worthless because none of it was true. It was all fictional. Mm-hmm. And so, that's another message that I have is, when you set metrics, you can't use them as a stick to beat people up. Yeah, we have to use them to measure productivity, performance, whatever. But let's get to, and another great example I use is like marketing. It's like, if you're pouring all this money into marketing and you tell the sales team, well, goodness, we drove, 1,000 people to your doorstep from this marketing campaign. What's wrong with you guys? But if it was the wrong 1,000 people, if you're selling, let's go to the extreme. If you're selling an adult beverage and you drove 1,000 12-year-olds to my doorstep, it's totally worthless. And so that's, to me, those are what metrics, instead of beating up the sales team for we drove 1,000 people to your doorstep and y'all performed 0, it's let's dig into what happened through this process to see, were they the right 1,000 people or not? And, again, we do lose sight of that. And
agreed.
To your point about the message coming downhill, my experience, especially in the bigger corporations, is that message picks up momentum and intensity. And, it may have been, let's do this. And then it's like, okay, we're going to do this tomorrow. And then it's like, oh my God, we're going to, everybody down the line just emphasizes the point more and more till it becomes so distorted when you get to the workers. They're like, right. Oh my gosh, another emergency. That's just what we need.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. That happens all too frequently, doesn't it?
Exactly.
All too frequently.
But, a couple things you brought up, the communication, I'm big in that because I talk to my team and I listen. I didn't always like what they said. They didn't always like what I said, but we had honest communication. The other thing I did is I knew my people. I knew all of them. I knew them, their families, their kids, what was going on, because, if they came in a little bit off this morning, I wanted to know why. Is it a big problem? It was a little problem driving into work. You got frustrated with traffic. Was it a family problem that's going to linger? Because if it is, I need to know about it so we can plan, because that's the biggest thing is, just planning for these things. And it's the something else y'all said too, the human factor is that we can't park our personal lives at that door. I mean, it comes in whether you want it to or not. That's just part of being a human being.
Of course it does, especially nowadays, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of remote work. I mean, we were working from home so much more now. Mm-hmm. It's imperative, though, that we as leaders understand the human element to what it is that they do.
Yeah.
and what their drive is and their reasons are for what they do. Creating a culture of, hey, here's our core values, post it up, read it every day, every meeting, but where's the living part of it go?
Exactly.
And where does that get lost in translation? Because the fact of the matter is, Roy, in companies as they grow, when they have these core values, and you as the business owner and your executives and those that are helping run your business as a CEO, COO, president, etc., you've set out these core values and you believe that they're being followed because they're small. But as you grow,
it's such a disconnect.
There's that disconnect. Do you really know if it's being followed or not? And then you've got that huge, that goes back to trust.
Yeah.
Because and that's why, as you said, Roy, people leave their managers and their leaders. They don't leave the business. They don't leave the company. It's because of how it's presented.
Yeah.
So you're preaching the core values, but man, you treat me like crap.
Yeah.
Or you talk to me as if I'm a slave, or I'm getting verbally abused, and or whatever it might be. It creates toxicity because now those core values really aren't being followed.
Right.
However, every time that you hear the CEO speak or the director of the team speak, of the department speak, they're so proud of all of these managers that create this toxicity because they're following core values. And so the employees are like, I don't understand what's going on here.
Right.
If these are the core values and this is how they think this should be ran, I want nothing to do with it.
But why are my teammates crying in their cubicle almost every day?
Yeah.
Or why are they getting sick constantly? It's just that it takes on a physical component, and it's really sad. We've lived it too firsthand that, when you have this awareness, and I certainly did after my incident in 2018, being in the hospital in the ICU, but it was this awareness of like, this is a toxic work environment.
Yeah.
But you have to have the awareness. And the sad part is that people, when you're in it, you don't realize it until you take a step back or something catastrophe happens going, oh, okay. Like, I'm in the hospital. Like, where did this stem from?
Yeah.
And it's so sad. And they were in denial. I mentioned this and it was like, oh no, what are you talking about? Everything, it wasn't, rainbows and sunshine. But it was stressful. Yeah. Well, that's just the sales environment. Yeah. No, it's not. Like I've been in other sales departments and it was not a beating over the head, process and they scared if you're going to walk in and get fired every day. I'm like, I don't think I've ever had that in all my years. It's scary. Yes. Because of maybe certain metrics, of course, and performance, but that's always there, but not to the fact
people
that
aren't afraid to work.
Yeah, if you get physically scared to come to work, that's an issue.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, some people don't realize that until you talk about it, and you're like, oh, well, maybe that feeling when I get sick in the morning, or when I'm actually crying in my car before my shift starts. Yeah,
or the night before you get so anxious you can't sleep.
That's a red flag.
Yeah,
it really is. And as leaders, it is our responsibility to get noted for that, to find out. And it goes back to what you said, Roy. Get to know your people and listen to them.
Yeah.
But then take action. I actually, a manager told me once I had my team, they're like, great, get to know your people. But they didn't equip me. They didn't tell me how.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I can have conversations, but then what?
Yeah.
I was still learning myself.
Yeah.
So it's like they had the intentions, they got to that point, but then that's it.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, let's go back to beating over the head and cranking out and getting all the metrics. It was just it was very interesting.
Yeah. Well, that used to
know what they don't know. So
right.
That used to be
that
used to be our model, and again, I keep going back to this because it was a huge company, but it was like, the next manager was the person who had either been there the longest and volunteered, or it was one of the lower men who they forced it on because there's nobody else that would take it. And so, I want to get to one other thing before I ask, I want to say what do we want to look at for leaders? But before that, I was going to mention the getting sick is, this is when I realized that my time at this company had come to an end because me and was with like 3 other managers, and we 2 of us were field people. We had people in the field, and a couple were engineers that did some work. And so we were riding, going somewhere, and one of them was like, oh, can you pull over? I need to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like my grandmother. We can't pass a bathroom without you needing to pull over. And so then all these three guys chimed in like, well, I was young at the time. I was in my 30s, and they chimed in. Well, like, when you've been here for this long, we take heart medication and blood thinner and this and that, and you'll be needing to go. I'm like, this job is never going to drive me to have to take medication. I can guarantee. And that's when I started looking around and saying, do I really want to be in a job that has forced me to a point that I need to take medication? Now, it was what we used to call the golden handcuffs, because they had good pension, and that was another trigger. Not to get too deep, but the minute the pension changed, where it wasn't a defined payout, that's when it kind of freed me of that to be able to move, and it was the best thing that happened, because I've always enjoyed what I've done, and I don't want to be in that position. But let's get back to this. Part of this is like the process that we take to bring these new leaders up. So what are some? Well, it used to be either you've been here the longest or you're the best at your job. Hopefully we figured out that just because you're awesome at putting together widgets doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be awesome at managing people that put together widgets. So what are some some qualities that we want to look at to promote that next person?
Well, see, it's all about, when it comes down to people, we've got to develop leaders, right? As we mentioned, leadership is learned. It's not automatic.
Right.
Learning to be a successful, positive leader, influential leader, takes time and it takes development. So it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
So in a company and in a business, the focus needs to be, what is your succession plan?
All right.
How are you building up those that you feel would be solid leaders? How are you, those that are willing to want to learn, how are you developing those people? Yeah. That's really what it comes down to, right? Leadership starts and ends with you as the leader, period. And so for you so qualities that you would look for, and everyone has so many different qualities and variances depending on the company, right? What it is that they're looking for. But if somebody comes in and they're just solid, they're coming in, they're working, they're doing what they need to do, they communicate well. We all have deficiencies. Yeah. It's a matter of identifying people that personally have a goal and understand your values, understand the mission of the business and the company, and are willing to do what it takes to accomplish that mission within reason and within the ethical means of the core values. Okay. Then those are people that, and if they're willing to want to learn to become a leader and they can see themselves there, those are people that you want to take under your wing and find a way to create a development plan to see how they move along and how they're able to grow. Yeah. Because then when they get to that point, now they've got some solid foundations. Then you promoting individuals that have proven themselves that they've been able to lead their peers as well. See, peer leadership is huge. Yeah. Because you influence people around you. They come to you and they follow you and what you do, not because they have to, because you're not paying them. You're not their boss. You're their peer. Yeah. But they do it because of who you are, your performance, your communication. So if you can influence your peers to follow you, that's a great example of any leader to be able to see that. Hey, the peers actually look up to this person a lot as well. Yeah. And to find out from those peers, what are the characters that you like about this individual when it comes to job. You see, then you can identify those types of people. Yeah. But you have to do that, you have to listen to them to identify that and not play the political game and in promoting people. Well, this person sold $2 million this year. They've got to be the director next. Right. That doesn't mean they can sit there and manage and direct and lead a 25-person team of salespeople to do the same thing. Right. At all, by any means. I mean, it's pure and simple, right?
Yeah. And they may not even want to, is the other thing. Sometimes we kind of force that on people, like, I'm happy here selling, doing what I'm doing. I don't necessarily want to be thrust into that position.
That's it.
And that's okay too. And see, that's the responsibility partly of seeing that communication to figure out going, okay, here's a great rock star, but what is their future? What do they want? Yeah. Did they want a leadership role eventually? Or maybe, hey, they're happy making, that X amount of dollars and they're happy they got a system and that's fine.
That's all they want. That's all they want to do.
Yeah. And that's all they want to do. Guaranteed, this is great for your listeners. Here's a challenge. Guaranteed, doesn't matter what position that you are. I bet you if you ask someone, who is someone that you can talk to or go to, who's your go-to person that if you had a question about something
At work.
at work, other than your typical boss or your
Right.
Outside of your
outside of that, right?
Yeah.
Guaranteed, they're all going to point to one person.
Yeah.
Right. And then the opposite is true. It's just like, who is the biggest jerk in your team? They're all going to point to a person.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I talk about in the employee retention process. I think is that when you bring new people on, I'm not going to get into the whole onboarding thing because I think we do that wrong too. But I think we need to provide that mentor who is good for people to go to. And so, that may be a litmus test is, provide, if you think you have a good candidate for leadership, make them a mentor to see, ask that question. But because I had, the situation that I had, one of the guys that they would send people to, I don't know why. He was a great worker, but he was a little bit twisted in his thinking. And so I was with him, and a guy came up and asked a question about this specific situation. He gave him an answer. He walked away. I said, well, why didn't you tell him that, this has been happening at this location and that's where he needs to start? He's like, I had to figure it out on my own. Like, he needs to figure it out on his own too. I'm like, oh my goodness, we're missing the whole point. We should be helping each other through. And so anyway, that was, to me, that was not the guy that he needs to be promoted, because that's not, to me, it wasn't a great leadership skill to say, hey, you got to figure this stuff out on your own. We should all be helping each other.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and even if that's the case, right? Even if you did promote, what is your plan when you promote someone to a leadership role?
Yeah.
When you've promoted them, what is your plan to develop them in that next level?
Yeah.
To assess where they currently are in leading teams. What is their communication style? How do they lead a team? How do they identify what their other team's communication style is? Right. And if you can equip them, I mean, there was a perfect example. There was a company years ago that I worked for. For the first 2 weeks, all we did was leadership development training before I could even step a foot and make any decisions in my role. It was a great experience for me. It opened up my eyes. I'm like, well, I can do this. I've been management. Why would? Like, nope. This is what we all do to all of our leaders and develop them. And I learned so much. And yeah, it was 2 weeks. You got to pay these people still. But that development makes a huge difference when it comes down to leading a team. What are we doing? I'm not saying, hey, listen, unless they're like Mr. Leadership Joe, we can't promote them. What I'm saying is have a plan in place. Is there a development plan for your employees that are interested? Nowadays it's so easy. You connect with a company like ourselves or anybody else that provides opportunity for them to have like an online platform where they can go in, and if they've selected one, I'm interested in leadership development. Well, at least get something started to find out and assess them where they are to get some background. Right. Because that's succession planning, and it keeps people engaged and gives value to what it is that they do and the values of the company. Yeah. Then when you need somebody, these 5 people have been developing themselves over the last 2 years through this program that we have for them. Well, we're going to interview those people for this role, right? That is the intentional decision of making a decision on who you move into roles that are going to fully develop their teams.
Yeah, and talking about planning and strategy, I think that's good because sometimes we, especially as newer businesses or growth mode businesses, it's like, they come in on Monday and like, oh my gosh, we need to add somebody here. And so we make these reactive decisions instead of like, taking a little bit further approach and saying, what are our triggers for this growth? And then for putting on a new manager, a new leader. And so we need to be training them up and developing in this time that we have. We don't want to wait till Monday morning. Like, we got to hire somebody today, and it's like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Who's that going to be? Is taking that approach is that at some point, if you're in a growth mode or if you want to grow your business, you're going to have to add these managers. So get out in front of that and at least develop them.
Right. Agreed.
Absolutely.
Meet them where they are,
right.
And meet them where they are. And if you have a plan in place where you're developing, I already have a development plan in place for those that want to become leaders in the business.
Yeah.
Then because there's going to be emergencies that come up. Right. The director of this department resigns last minute. We're like, we got to get somebody in there ASAP.
Right.
Well, but if you've developed your people,
Right.
Yeah.
But if you've already had that proactiveness
Yeah.
and already had that as a culture, already had that as a, in that,
Right.
then it's a national society, natural to be like, oh,
well, this
okay,
person
well, now we
really-
have a pool of people.
Right.
And then you're constantly thinking that forward thinking and being proactive. And
Yeah.
what's happening is that, we're stuck in this old mentality is that, we have people or organizations, and it doesn't matter. I was a state government worker for 7 years, so it's almost the same.
Yeah.
That until we're putting our backs in a corner, until there's this huge fire, that's all of a sudden it's like, oh, we need to do something.
Yeah.
It's just like, really, like, haven't we learned, that we need to be, yes, it sounds good in theory when people are like, oh, you need to be forward thinking and being proactive. Well, there's a truth to it.
Yeah.
Any of the greats that we have out there that we've mentioned early on, there's truth to that. So
Yeah.
why not heed that and actually do something about it, even if it's just a little bit.
Yeah.
Have a transformation table, bringing certain leaders to a table that are kind of have those qualities that we pointed out that are like, hey, everybody's going to this person. Maybe they got something.
Yeah.
Bring them in on something. Make a decision. Hey, bring them into that world, right? And see how they handle a little bit.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But again, when they get certain leaders, unfortunately, they get so busy in their jobs, in what they have to do, and putting out fires, that they just don't have that moment, unfortunately, to continue to grow, because they blame it on time management, and they just think they know it all.
Yeah.
And
they've hit the top.
they hit the
right?
top, and the cliche of like, oh, leadership is so lonely at the top. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you did it wrong.
Yeah.
You forgot to bring some people behind you, to come up. So, and that's why we're just so passionate about it, because we can go on and on about it. And you are too, Roy. It's just like, there's such a street, there's this leadership sadness that it's just constant reminder to these newer leaders that are now starting their own businesses thanks to COVID, because they got tired of the other one, and fall into that old mentality.
Yeah.
So, it's like, grow, treat yourself, lead yourself before you lead others.
Yeah.
Keep growing and having that growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And you have to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
And by doing that, and I'll give you a tip here, is that watch who you are around with. Jim Rohn says it the best, man. You are the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with, and that is true.
Right.
Put yourself with mentors, put yourself with coaches, put yourself even reading a book of the greats that are out there, and take a little bit here and there. But the next step, actually apply it.
Right.
Don't just sit, read a book, great, but then put it back on the shelf.
I'd add
Right.
accountability too.
Yes, and
You've
accountability.
got to be accountable, right? You
Yeah.
got to make sure somebody's got to be there to make sure, hold your feet to the fire, to make sure you accomplish what you've read and studied and learned on.
Yeah.
And share that out. Read a little bit, do a little bit, and that's exactly what our mentors have shared with us. And we're coaches, but we got 5 coaches. Don't be so proud that you're a coach and you know everything. I don't care if you've been in for 50 to 20 something years. You still have a coach.
Yeah, I got 5 coaches,
We got
Roy.
5.
I'm that much work. Okay?
Well, that's what they always say, and I think once people get to the top, sometimes they think that they're the smartest one, and the old saying that if you're the smartest man in the room, you need to find another room. And
Yep.
I think that's
Exactly.
even when we get to the top, we have to surround ourselves with people we can trust that can give us good advice, because we're never going to know it all. We can't watch it all. And that, we've talked about a lot, but also, something we mentioned earlier about people at the top not knowing what's going on at the bottom is you need to get out of your office and get out, to the lower levels. Go see what's really happening out there. Pick up the phone and call. If you have an office call, how's that call handled when it comes in? I mean, these are things that we can't just forget about. We always have to be thinking about them, even at the very top. So the other thing, talk for a minute, we've talked more about the corporate side, but let's talk about personal growth, because there are a lot of people that, like you said, the pandemic has forced them to be in business. Maybe they had a skill or a trade. They were a plumber, maybe a woodworker, whatever. but now they want to grow the business and add people. So let's talk a little bit about some opportunities to do this on our own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll see. And as I mentioned before, it all start as a leader. See, again, leadership is influence, right? Even though you may not have a position in a leadership role, I believe we're all leaders in some fashion if we use our influence on purpose,
right,
in a way that brings value and helps in a positive way. That is a true definition of a leader is that influence.
Yeah.
And so it starts and ends with you. Sherri and I have developed a method called the empowerment method. We're co-writing co-authoring a book that is going to be released August, September, called Empowerment Leadership, the 10 principles every leader must follow to lead with influence.
Okay.
And empowerment doesn't have an E on it. It starts with the M. It's empowerment. There's 10 letters, and each letter corresponds to a principle.
Okay.
That first principle, M, is me, the me principle. It all starts and ends with you. If you do not develop yourself as a leader, you can't develop other people.
Yeah.
You see, the reality of it is that you can only give at the limit of your own growth.
Right.
You can only give at the limit of your own growth. You can't expect that you're going to be able to lead a team of people, whether it's your business or not, if you haven't developed yourself as a leader, right, so that you can lead people, right? Yeah. So it all starts there and it all ends there as well, because that's the responsibility and burden of a leader. Yeah. Is making sure that we develop other people, and it starts with us.
Yeah. And even if you're young, starting out, going into the corporate role, my advice is always seek out coaches like yourself to grow yourself. Maybe you don't have any aspirations, but maybe you do, or maybe you don't today at 25, but maybe at 35 you do. If you develop these skills, then it will be an easier transformation to step into that role. Or, actually you don't really step into it. I think, like you were saying earlier, that you kind of become that mentor person that people go to before that, but then it's an easier transition, to step into more of a manager or the title of some form of leadership. And right. I think that's on us because, back in the old days, I'm guilty of this. You went to a job and you expected them to do everything or tell you this is when you go to this development or do this or do that. But, if you want to do something on your own or even be successful in a company, the burden is still on us as individuals.
Of course. Mm-hmm. That's our account. And there's that accountability piece, right? It's our responsibility if we want to grow or succeed. Yeah. We've got to identify what is it that I need to do. Right. And we don't know what we don't know. Yeah. Right. You don't know what you don't know. So it's time to ask those that might and use those resources. I can't tell you if I had one thing to do over again, we've been asked this question, if there's one thing that you as a leader could do differently, what would it be? And hands down is I would have surrounded myself with the right mentors and coaches a lot sooner than I did.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it makes a significant difference. Yep. And it could speed up your growth by easily 75 to 85%. Yeah. By doing that. So that is absolutely something I recommend. And perhaps there's someone out there, as one of your listeners, that have experienced this where, hey, I was just promoted into this role. I know I want it because I know I want to move up. But man, my manager, I don't know if I'm ready, and my manager didn't give me. I'm not sure if I'm ready for this. Like, how do I lead 25 people? Heck, I was able to help my peers, but how can I lead 25 people? I'm not sure where to start. And unfortunately, there's no playbook that can be thrown at you. Right. And if you don't have, if you're a leader that has now moved somebody into a new role as a new manager, a young new manager, right, fairly fresh to leadership, and you are not coaching them, mentoring them, guiding them along to become a successful leader, right, you're doing it wrong. And unfortunately, you should not be a leader at all. Yeah. Because that is the burden and responsibility of us as leaders to provide that type of development to those that we lead. Right. However, we can say that all the time. We preach this all the time, but it's not a miracle. It's not going to happen 100% all over the place. That's why people need us. Yeah. Okay. And that's okay. However, that's where that empowerment leadership method and that system comes into place, because we believe that is the rewriting of this old 1970s playbook of how positional style leadership and how you run a business should be played. Instead of capitalism, it's peopleism is what I call it. It's time for us to get back into that.
Exactly.
And when it comes down to business. Right?
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about business and the profession, but this also transcends that, because as family people, we need to be leaders in our family. As if we have kids, we need them to buy into whatever we're trying to sell them, because people are always like, it doesn't matter what position you are. It's like, I'm not in sales, but really we're all in sales. We're all trying, if we have a spouse, we're trying to sell them on something. If it's kids, we're trying to sell them on how to be what we think are good citizens in this. So that those leadership qualities can transcend our work very easily.
Absolutely.
Yep. And that's why that leadership is influence piece, right? It's not about position at all. It's about how you're influencing those around you.
Right.
Because if you do it in a way that's impactful and done on purpose, not only is it going to influence and impact your family in a positive way, it's going to impact those around you, your community, your neighborhood, your city, your state, your country, the world. But you have to develop other people in the process, right? Hey, I've mentored this person. I've influenced this person. Do me a favor to pay me back. Go do that for somebody else.
Right.
And the next thing you know, you're changing things. You're transforming the whole idea there.
Yeah, and we can't be scared to give that away. I mean, I know it's y'all's business. Y'all make money off this, but I'm just saying in general in life, if sometimes people are very protective, like, oh, I don't want to tell them how I did this. And we need to be open and free to give that information to coworkers or, even people that maybe work at other companies. It's not, I don't know. I guess it also kind of, we get what we put out there, the old karma thing. And so, we want to put as much good stuff out there as we possibly can. It means helping people. And I like that peopleism. Is that what?
Peopleism.
Yeah. I mean, I love that, because I think that we've become so focused that, like, in my prior utility experience, we became so focused on the quarterly results that we were making poor decisions that impacted people poorly.
Right.
If we'd get back to making these decisions that really empower our people and support them and do what we need to do for them, I'm a firm believer that the profits will follow. We're not going.
That's right.
It doesn't have to be detrimental to our bottom line to care about our people and do the right thing.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's a side effect, right? You develop your people well. You treat your people well. We can't be a leader without people. Right. I've not met any leader that I know of in history that is a leader without people. That's just we need people to lead, right? We need them to lead. But the side effect of leading them effectively and successfully is the profit.
Right.
So don't getting wrapped up in that. People before profits is our motto, and we believe that 100%. We've seen it, even with other coaches and leaders, and those same in the leadership space that we are.
Right.
We invite people. We do one-on-ones and talk with those that most people consider a competitor. Yeah. Right. We don't consider that. We can't handle how many millions of people in the world. Yeah. But we need more people to do that. Yeah. And it's not about, again, it's not about like, I'm not giving you my secrets. It's about how can I help you help them? Exactly. It's not about us. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's about them. Yep. And every leader, whether you're a coach, a leadership consultant, whether you are in a leadership position, that needs to be your mentality. It's not about us. It's about them. Yeah. When that focus is pivoted, your decisions that you make, how you develop people, you start looking at it entirely different. Yeah. Because I'll promise you follow those types of models, profit will happen because people will love to work with you. Yep. They'll want to follow you and they'll listen to you. Yep.
And also how you make a person feel lasts longer than anything else. Yep.
Really and you does. Also
that's what they remember the most.
That's what I remember.
Right. Yeah. And I think it also helps with talent attraction, is that when the word gets out that it's awesome to work here, that they support their people, we treat you right. People are lining up at your door, and now instead of, because I always say we want to be an employer of choice, not an employer of last resort. And so now, instead of having to pick through the leftovers of the applicants that just couldn't get hired anywhere, now we've got the pick of the cream of the crop because everybody wants to come work here. So it's
that's exactly
and you know what
it.
business that speaks volumes to that is Chick-fil-A. If you've done any research or any type of history regarding the owner of that business that started it,
Right.
and it comes up every time, especially in this leadership space, and I, leaned in a little bit more going, why is this so like fantastic? What the heck? It's chicken, right?
Yeah.
It's because he had the people first mentality.
Right.
And there's people constantly for employees that want to work there, and they're always adding new people all the time. They don't just sit there and have an open like, oh, we need people, and then they close the door. Oh, we need people again. They're not doing that. It's a constant revolving as far as getting new talent in, and then the ones that don't want to stick around kind of weed themselves out anyway.
Right.
And that's okay, because here's another rock star that's going to come right behind with that. So
perfect example of how the quality of their product is a representation of the quality of the people.
Right.
And the quality of the people are the representation of the quality of leadership.
Yep.
And all interconnected.
And it's the quality of service too, because they train their people to go above and beyond. Because I think it's that the management cares so much about their people, but they also instill that we have to care this much about our customers too. And so, definitely one of the better quick dining experiences that's out there for sure. And then like I said, they always get a lot of press about how they develop owners. I think it's a location that's not too far from us. It was a young lady that started as a team member in high school, worked her way up. Now she's got her own franchise. So, it's a great success story.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of developing people.
Yep. Well, guys, I know we're running way late. We could talk about this for 2 or 3 more days, I'm sure. I mean, I feel like we're all passionate about this. So do me a favor, though. When y'all get ready to release the book late summer, I wish you would give me a call and let's get back together. I'd like to have y'all back on again. Like I said, so much this goes in so many different directions. I don't think we could ever cover it all. But it's been a pleasure speaking with y'all. So before we get away, what is a tool that y'all use, and if it's collectively good, if you got separate ones, but what is a tool or a habit, something that you use every day that really adds value personally, professionally?
Yeah, I'll start with that one.
Okay.
What I do every day, and thanks to my mentors, and I have implemented it ever since, is that I do a reflection at the end of the day. I actually put it on my calendar and actually do a daily reflection. And on the top of that Word document, as simple as it is really we'll review the wins and the defeats, but also who did I add value to today?
Okay.
And it really makes me sit and think, because we get so caught up in our day-to-day and activities that we really have to take that moment to be like, okay, maybe who did I introduce somebody to? Who did I help? Who did I give advice to? And then to really pin that out, and you can just jot it down.
That's
and
awesome.
Sometimes it's a pain in the butt because you're like, oh, I don't want to do it. But then I'm like, no, it's worth it.
It's worth it. Keeps your focus.
That's good.
For me, it's like that there. I do I do a reflection as well. But Sherri has a very specific system she uses, which works out great. But for me, just 2 things that I do every day, every single day. I tell you, there's really 6 things a leader should do every single day, but we won't get into those. But there's 2 things that I would recommend everybody do.
Okay.
Number one, I read something every day that relates that helps me grow as a coach, as a leader, and also as a corporate trainer, and as an executive leadership developer. I always read something every day that I try to look at and how I can implement that. And the second thing that I do every day when I'm, we're done work and we're downstairs after dinner, we're, chilling out in a living room or whatever, I'll take a moment and I'll go through in my mind, my Rolodex in my mind or in our CRM, and see if there's people, our clients that we've worked with in the past, that we work with now, that I haven't spoken to for a little while, or I haven't reached out to in a little while. And I'll try to find a way to reach out to them, send them something specific in an email, or give them a phone call and say, haven't heard from you in a little while. How you doing? And to keep those relationships strong, so people understand that we are here for them, and that doesn't cost them anything or me anything but time, just to reach out, because relationships is what builds successful leadership. So those are two things that I do every day.
Okay. Yeah, and I like that, Sherry, about writing down the people that we've helped. That's something I've never thought. Yeah, and that's why I asked this question, because I love to collect good habits, and I feel like, this is introducing these good habits to others out there, but really taking stock of that. And one more thing about our, what we got done is I try to tell people, celebrate what you did get done, because we can be the hardest on ourselves. And I'm the example that I had 10 things on my list to do today. I got 7 done, and I'll kick myself for the rest of the day about these 3. If I could hit 700, I would be making gazillions of dollars playing baseball. So we have to look at that. If you can let's celebrate what we're doing right, and we can work on those things that we need to fix.
That's right. Celebrate your wins. I like it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. Tell everybody, of course, who you work with, how you can help them, and then, of course, how can they reach out and get a hold of you?
Sure. We work with small businesses that have teams. Generally, anywhere from the sweet spot is anywhere from 50 to 300 employees, and that have teams and that are finding that they're growing and that there is some gaps there that they're trying to fill, because it's starting to get big now. Where as a business owner, hey, how do we keep the communication going? How do we keep the lines open? Who do I put in what places here as far as positions, or who do I lead? How do I assess? That's a great example. Companies that have grown to the point where now they're starting to get some negative feedback from employees. There's like this negative culture, but they don't know where it came from. We have assessments that we can provide for the entire company to find out where those opportunities are, to put in place a process and a program to help reduce that gap and bring that success better. We also work with new managers who have just been promoted or even been a manager, and maybe their boss has now been replaced and is a different type of person. And here we are. I don't know how to deal with this person. The other one I love dealing with. I don't know how to deal with this person. As a matter of fact, they've given me 10 things I got to fix the next 6 months or I'm out.
Yeah.
Like those are the types of things that we help with. We have seen a significant increase in improvement in businesses. We also have a sweet spot for solo entrepreneurs, just because we are entrepreneurs. Yeah. And so we do have a sweet spot there too. And we absolutely will help as they're growing and bringing people in, and how to develop those individuals to become strong employees and take on roles as they move along and grow. We have seen up to a 550% increase in revenue and in business growth with those types of individuals, as long as they follow the process of accountability that we provide them, because we give them homework and they've got to get it done to make sure they're successful. So those are who we work with and who we love to work with, but we're open to conversation with anybody just to see what it is that we can do to help you. Because if we can't help you, we can point you in the right direction.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
they can reach us anywhere on our website, loueverettgroup.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. Even Google Lou Everett Group, and I guarantee we'll be up there. So
yeah, okay. We're all over it.
All right. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much. That's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Roy. You can find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We're on all the major social media platforms, as well as the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Spotify. If we're not on one that you listen to, please reach out. I'd be glad to add it on. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your business.